All right, we are just waiting to join our friend in. It's Scott Thompson, who will be joining us very shortly. He's talk show host with 900 CHML Hamilton. Now, I know you guys have been wanting to hear what our friends in Ontario have to say about this election campaign, and I think we got them now. Scott, are you there?
Is 7 minutes after the hour. It's the Scott Thompson Show. It's News Talk 900 CHML. Good afternoon to Southern Ontario. Good morning to Southern Alberta. This is a great, unique opportunity we have right now to share views from the East and the West and the big election issues of the day. Lots of ways to reach our show here, the Scott Thompson Show in Hamilton, Ontario. You can always send us a note, Scott Thompson at 900CHML.com. The phone lines are always open at 905-645-3221, star 9900 on your cell. Facebook and Twitter as well. Let's hook up now with Danielle Smith, host of Global News Radio, 770 CHQR in Calgary, Alberta. Danielle, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Scott. I'm so glad to be able to talk to you. And I should just say, because I've done a few of these before, that people are shy. And so if they want to get onto the phone lines, they should queue up now so that we can get right to them. Because I know my audience is really interested in hearing what folks in Hamilton have to say about the issues that are going to turn their vote in this election. Have you been doing a lot of talking about it?
Oh, absolutely. Pretty much every day. My goodness, it's been writing the show. But before we get into any of this, the first thing that I have to ask you is, what is the weather like in Calgary, Alberta right now?
Yeah, it has been terrible. And I have a pretty long commute in the morning. It was pretty awful on the weekend, but it's melting. This is the beautiful thing about our part of the world, is that we have Chinooks periodically.
Yes.
So we're used to seeing, and that's kind of our snow clearing strategy for our city. They just wait for it all to melt. Once you guys get the winter, though, I think it ends up sticking there for a few months.
I lived in Calgary for 3 years during the Olympics. What a great time it was. What a great city it is. And, I remember the sayings, if you don't like the weather, wait for an hour, it will change. But, that's what I greatly miss about being in Alberta is a Chinook. Because once the Ontario winter locks on, we're in it for several weeks. Whereas in Alberta, it's like every couple of weeks it goes up to like 17 degrees and it's spring, isn't it?
It absolutely is. But you know what? You guys need a lot of oil and natural gas, then, I would think, to be able to fuel your cars and heat your homes. And we are here to help. We are here to help. All you need to do is help us get a pipeline out there.
Here it comes. Now, let's talk about this, because this is obviously a massive issue in the West. What are the big issues? Is it oil? Because, man, it has a hard time penetrating in Ontario, although I must say it is making grounds finally.
I must tell you, it's the only issue, really, in this campaign. And it's really a shame, because I think that you've got Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, and Elizabeth May, the Green Party leader, who have polarized this issue in a way that they shouldn't have. If you're going to be a responsible politician, they are not being responsible. But number one, they're both saying that they would not help a coalition government unless they got the Trans Mountain Pipeline canceled. And I can imagine, how would people feel in your part of the world if they said, okay, well, sorry, you don't get our agreement unless you close down every combustion engine auto plant, or you close down every steel plant. I can't imagine any other industry that would be campaigned against like this at the federal level. And it seems like that's why everybody here feels like we're a real target.
You're living the reality of it, because that's the industry in your part of the world. And you have seen the effects of that. Unfortunately, Ontarians, they're oblivious to what happens outside of their borders. That's just the way it's been for an awfully long time. But, I don't think what Ontarians realize, and what the rest of the country realizes, is what this transition will take, what this transition will look like, how long it will take to take place, and what we will all have to go through when this happens. There is a responsible way to do all of this, but as you said, we're dealing with extremes on either side, and it seems the political party of the day will pick up whatever they need in order to drive their point home.
And it's a shame, because initially Elizabeth May started off with a strategy that I thought was uniting for the country. When she initially announced her Mission Possible strategy, she said that we would wean ourselves off foreign oil, because the Irving refinery in New Brunswick still brings in 100,000 barrels of oil per day, pretty close to that, from Saudi Arabia. And so our position, when she said we will wean ourselves off foreign oil, we'll become energy independent, we will rely more on Alberta oil and gas to fuel the needs of the country. I think that was a very unifying message. Something happened between then and her announcing her campaign, because now she's talking about phasing out the oil sands by 2030. And I can tell you, if that's the direction that the government goes, because she holds the balance of power, that is going to cause massive national unity problems.
You know, it's fascinating. We had Elizabeth May on the show and talking about her policies. You know, we tried to have all of them on over the course of the election campaign. And I was asking her about that transition period. What would that look like? Like, it's obvious the Greens are not going to form government in this election, but if by chance they would, what would it be like as one day the government we have today and then transferring over into a Green government? What would that transition be like? And you don't really get any kind of answer. You don't get any kind of policy beyond Green. You don't hear anything about the economy. You don't hear anything on how this is logically going to be done, other than what you were talking about earlier. But as the election campaign moves into its dying days, into its latter part, again, those sorts of issues are falling by the wayside.
Can you tell me, in Hamilton, do people internalize the issue the way we do here? Because
Not at all.
Well, it's funny because this is how it seems. It seems like, we'll meet our emissions targets by piling on Alberta. Whereas if this is going to be a national effort, it would seem to me that there should be a robust discussion in Hamilton about how those industries are going to get greened as well. Does that even happen?
It's funny because we've just come out of 15 years of a Liberal government, including the last several with Kathleen Wynne and her energy file, which drove prices through the ceiling here and eventually had to be refinanced and sent down to further generations in order to bring the bills more manageable. Now things have completely changed with a Doug Ford government. We've had people on the air that said that they'd rather have Kathleen Wynne back than they would go with the Doug Ford government. So what that has done is that has intensified that debate. We think because if we pay a couple more cents for a carbon tax or what have you, that, we're good. We feel good about that. Everything's fine. Everything's great as we slowly get off coal and we're using nuclear energy here and hydroelectricity. We haven't felt the effect that what Alberta has. And I think Ontarians are misjudging the impact that your natural resources have on the economy of this country.
Well, even what you just said right there, because the conversation we're having here and the conversation we're having about how we can reduce global emissions is all of those polluting coal plants, let's phase them out and bring in clean natural gas. And yet natural gas in Ontario has turned into an election issue and it's controversial. It seems odd to me that you would accept nuclear and hydro over natural gas. What's the problem with natural gas there?
There is no problem with natural gas. And you're going to see an equal debate when it comes to nuclear, which is a whole other different discussion. It was interesting. There was a coal plant, I believe, in Western Germany. And they're in the process of taking over a small town, an area with a surface mine and such. And this is the sort of problems that Europe is dealing with. And I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, here is a great reason to bring in Canadian natural resources. And instead of just trying to make us look good, Canada look good, let's help the world get off coal and what have you by using the natural resources that we have to bridge that gap.
Oh, Scott, that's music to my ears. When you run for federal office.
I know. But unfortunately, that message gets lost out here. And I mean, even prior to the election campaign starting, it was all climate change, all climate change, all climate change. And then finally, once the campaign started and the blackface videos came out, all of a sudden the campaign moved to affordability and we started to see more policies. There's been less about climate change.
Interesting. I want to talk to you more about that. Are you able to comment on why people are so mad at Doug Ford? We've got a new premier, conservative premier. We also had a change in government, pretty dramatic, but our premier is so popular. He's actually coming to Toronto and Ottawa this weekend to help Andrew Scheer out on his campaigning. It sounds like they've kept Doug Ford behind closed doors and not on the campaign trail, and that must have something to do with his personal popularity there. But what was it done wrong?
Absolutely. Doug Ford, this campaign crickets. You're not every time the Prime Minister comes into town and does and he's been in Ontario quite a bit, he'll mention Doug Ford's name at least a dozen times, trying to invoke that hostility that has developed. After 15 years of Liberal rule and a majority win by the Conservatives, he's now branded as the bad guy. That is because he's made a lot of drastic cuts, specifically that affected autism, which really struck a chord with a lot of Ontarians. He's been labeled as cut. And what they're selling here is if you don't like the cuts in Ontario, and the custodians have just announced in the schools on Monday with CUPE that they're going on strike. The teachers are still trying to negotiate. That's all being drummed up as part of the Prime Minister's campaign here in Ontario in order to try to stop Andrew Scheer from getting elected.
That's interesting. Okay, I know that we got to take a break.
We got to take a break.
Do you want to do that now? Do you want to throw?
Yeah, we'll take a quick break here. Again, this is an east-west discussion between Danielle Smith at I keep wanting to say QR 77, 770 CHQR in Calgary, Alberta. I'm Scott Thompson in Hamilton, Ontario. We're coming right back.
Go. Cheer. Sing. Blanchette. May. Bernier. 5 moderators. Barton. Delacourt. Friesen. La Flamme. Raj. Live from Gatineau, Quebec. The Federal Leaders Debate. Monday, October 7th on Global.
All right, welcome back. I'm Danielle Smith with 770 CHQR in Calgary. I am joined with Scott Thompson, talk show host with 900 CHML in Hamilton. You guys have been asking for this, where West meets East and East meets West. If you want to line up, and Owen already has, he's on the line. He's going to be first up. 403-974-8255. If you want to reach us in Calgary, that's our normal line. You can also text us. The normal line in Hamilton, 905-645-3221. But for those of you who are used to listening to Roy Green on the weekend, you can also call the 1-800 number, 263 1-800, that is, 263-2428. Scott, I want to ask, thanks for helping to clarify what's happening with Doug Ford, but can you give us an impression, when you think about Alberta at all, or when your listeners think about Alberta at all, what is your impression of Alberta? Because we spend a lot of time talking about Ontario and other provinces, I think because we're so impacted by decisions that are made in those other provinces. The cancellation of Energy East had a lot of conversation about whether or not we're understood in the East. Give us your impression. What do you think of us?
Hey, don't blame Energy East on us, man. That was Quebec. That had nothing to do with us. Anyway, you know what? You're not going to like the answer, Danielle. And I'm saying this because I've spent time living in Calgary, Alberta, way back when in the 80s. I'm sure it's an entirely different city now. That being said, and you people in the West used to say this, the center of the universe, Ontario thinks it is the center of the universe. And unfortunately, that is how Ontario thinks, specifically in the GTHA, in and around the Greater Toronto area. They are aware of what's going on. And again, it's not that they're snotty towards the East or the West. It's not that they don't care about what's going on. It's just such a cosmopolitan area that, and it's very, very fast paced, that people don't know what's going on beyond the nose in their face. That being said, as soon as gas prices go up, as soon as this discussion, this debate with your Premier Jason Kenney certainly making headway out here, along with the Conservative premiers that have been elected across the country. So I do not want to discourage Albertans and lead them to believe that Ontarians don't care. They do care. They care greatly. And I've got a guy named Dave standing by that wants to tell you guys how much he does love you. That being said, I think it just gets lost in the sauce of Ontarians thinking they're in the center of the universe. Well, and until it affects them, and until they realize what an impact Alberta Energy has on the rest of the country, they're trying to get the kids to hockey.
Well, let me ask you this, because one of the things we talk a lot about is how do we find common cause with other provinces? And so Andrew Scheer's got this idea of an economic utility corridor where you can build transmission lines so that if you get your nuclear and hydro going and you want to ship it out west with electricity on transmission lines, great. If you want to have a new corridor for a new transnational highway or a new rail line up in the north to unlock some of the mining operations up in northern Canada, then we're happy to do that. In return, that corridor could also be used for natural gas and oil pipelines. Like, these are the kind of conversations that we're having about how we can have major infrastructure projects that can build our country rather than these divisions that continue to pull us apart. Is there any discussion of that happening?
Great idea. My goodness, we saw it with the railway. We saw it with the Trans-Canada Highway. That being said, this discussion doesn't get to happen because it's overridden with climate change rhetoric. And it just keeps happening and happening and happening. And that's what the West is fighting against. Look at the Prime Minister. Look at his energy, buying a pipeline and then nothing happens and so on and so forth. I mean, that is the mentality of Ontario. That is also, I'm guessing, the mentality of Quebec. So the only thing I can say to Alberta is not only do Ontarians have to open their eyes to how the value of the natural resources in Alberta to the rest of the country, Alberta has to also sell it more. And I'm sure you've been screaming at the top of your lungs from the mountains ever since, the old days back in the 70s. But again, the message is getting lost in the climate change movement.
Well, let's see if we can find some common ground on things that that both of our audience are interested in talking about. I'll tell you the lay of the land here in Alberta. We've got 34 seats. The latest predictions, if you look at that 338.com, which aggregates the polls, suggest all 34 of them are going to go Conservative. There might be an NDP seat up in Edmonton that was held by Linda Duncan. She's retired now, but that's where our former premier has her stronghold, so that one might go NDP. And then we have 4 existing Liberal MPs, but it's not looking good for any of them. Give us a sense of what you're seeing there.
In Ontario, and despite what you're seeing across the country with the polls showing both the Conservatives and the Liberals relatively neck and neck within the margin of error and such, there's still regional hotspots in Ontario where the Liberals are very strong, and that's why the Prime Minister is campaigning so heavily in Ontario over the course of this campaign. So the Liberals still have the slight lead in Ontario at this point. But again, with things going back and forth and fallout from various issues, it's going to be fascinating to see between now and the election how that pans out. But from where we sit, it's still a virtual tie. Okay, so we've heard that Toronto, the 416, Toronto proper, is likely to go a split of Liberal and NDP, but they keep talking about the 905 around Toronto being competitive. And what's happening in Hamilton? Hamilton always and has been for a long time an NDP stronghold. Bits of Liberal back and forth. Conservatives don't really make a dent here at all, although Donna Skelly, of course, a provincial MP with success. But for the most part, this has been an NDP territory for a long time. And they're still expecting that to be in this upcoming election here? Is anybody willing to predict this election coming up? Because of
I'm asking you to put it on the line, Scott.
No, talk to me after the debate. It'll be interesting to see once that happens. To French debate tonight, but eventually the English debate next week. Perhaps that will change the tone a bit, because right now we're sort of in a lull. We're sort of the blackface issue is sort of settled down. We're hearing a lot of policy being grinded out over the last week or so. So we're sort of in a lull right now, and I'm really not sure Canadians are paying too much attention at this point. Okay,
I also need to know what's happening with the People's Party of Canada. With Renata Ford is running for them, the widow of a popular mayor, although a controversial one.
Until you brought that up, I never even thought of that.
Is she?
It's not even making a dent here. The People's Party of Canada with Maxime Bernier spoke at Mohawk College. A terrible situation happened here, in which anarchist left-wing demonstrators tried to stop Maxime Bernier from speaking at Mohawk College. It was actually a campaign on the Friday. He spoke on last Sunday. There was a campaign on the Friday to try to get Mohawk to close the doors and not even hold the event. And then the event takes place on Sunday night. There's just an incredible video out of a couple who we're going to have on the show a little later on today.
Oh, are you? That's going to be fascinating, because I saw that video where the
elderly man and woman walking across a crosswalk. She's got a walker, and there's 3 or 4 left-wing anarchists that are toe-to-toe, masked up to the hilt, and they're screaming all kinds of obscenities at this poor couple and not letting them pass. And it's like, everyone's the first to point at the alt-right whenever they make asses of themselves. Yet, on the other hand, here's the alt-left. Like what you see there, let's all come back to the center and try to have a normal discussion about all of this. But as far as the PPC party here, not really making much of a dent. It'll be interesting. I'm more concerned that they're going to steal votes from the Conservatives that they would have had anyway. But as far as the wife of the late Rob Ford, I forgot that she was even running for the party until you mentioned.
So you're not expecting a breakthrough. There will be no great breakthrough for the Greens in Alberta. If they're campaigning on shutting down the oil sands, forget it. It's zero. Big goose egg. What about there?
No, it's interesting because the Greens took off at the beginning of this campaign, and it looked like the NDP was dead in the water. And now, as time has gone by, it seems that the Greens are slipping a little bit. And Jagmeet Singh has seemed to got some traction in regard to, the situation with the blackface and how he handled that. So Greens, I think a lot of, it'll be interesting to see who steals their policy. But yeah, I'm not sure they're going to make. I mean, any ground that they do make will be good because they're literally starting from nothing. But at the end of the day, I can't see them having that much of an impact.
All right, let me just plug the lines. My lines are full here, 403-974-8255. We've also got 905-645-3221. We'd love to go back and forth on that. We're doing our breaks a little bit differently. We normally have news at the bottom of the hour. I know you guys don't, so we're going to keep on going through. And I just wanted to, you had made the reference to blackface, brownface, kind of taken over the discussion of what was important in this campaign. It strikes me that if you're locked in, if you don't like Justin Trudeau, this just affirmed that he's a clown show and you're not going to vote for him. If you do like Justin Trudeau, there's nothing that he can do. There's now a fourth dress-up picture that has come out, and it's barely even registered. How's it playing in Hamilton and area?
Danielle, unfortunately, we do have the news at the bottom of the hour, so we are going to have to break right now. Do you want to sign us off?
Let's do that. And then we'll be back with more calls. And stay with us. I'm here with Scott Thompson, talk show host, 900 CHML Hamilton. I'm Danielle Smith, 770 CHQR. And we'll be right back after news on Chorus Radio.
TELUS Living Well.
To have Scott
34 minutes after the hour. 34 minutes after the hour. Good afternoon, Southern Ontario. Good morning to Southern Alberta. This is Scott Thompson from the Scott Thompson Show. News Talk 900 CHML in Hamilton, Ontario. The phone numbers are 905-645-3221, star 9900 on your cell. We are joined by the Danielle Smith Show and host from Global News Radio, 770 CHQR in Calgary, Alberta, having an east-west discussion about the issues in regard to the federal election and how each feels about the other and whether those issues are being translated from borders. I'm going to play a quick call. This is Dave that's on the line, and I think he has a message that maybe some Albertans are willing to hear. Dave, go ahead. What are your thoughts? Hang on. Dave, go ahead. What are your thoughts to Calgary?
Well, for Calgary and Alberta, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody, the pipeline is a must, period. And a lot of people I talk to out here feel the same way. I don't know what Kool-Aid these politicians are drinking, but if they wanted to enact what they want to do, would bankrupt this country before they'd ever achieve their objectives.
Oh, Dave, music to my ears. Thank you.
There you go.
We love what you're saying. Dave. We've got Owen, Steve, Robert, Norm, and John on the line here. Let's go with Owen. Owen, what's your thought today?
Well, happy to hear from that caller in Ontario. And Danielle, just wanted to say, Ontario's got $620 billion worth of debt. And without a pipeline, we can't afford to pay.
Oh, and I think we're getting you. Unfortunately, your reception's not great, but he's kind of drawing the distinction between, like, everybody's got a debt problem, and we've all got to work together if we're going to generate enough revenues to be able to get the money that we need to pay for all the programs that are being promised.
Ontario needs to hear this, Danielle, and it's great because I think it's a chance for Ontarians to hear what it's like in another part of the country that isn't being enveloped with the rhetoric that they're hearing here. And again, I think it's time that both sides of these discussions are heard.
Yeah, let me just go to Steve because we weren't able to hear Owen very clearly. Steve, go ahead. What's your thought today?
I'd start out by saying that I was actually born in Ontario, spent my youth in Ontario, lived in Quebec for many years, so currently living in Calgary. I'd just like to tell the people, my family back east and the people of Canada, and for you guys too, kudos on you doing this. Do more of this. If Justin Trudeau gets reelected in this country after everything that he has done, the people that I'm talking to and the sentiment out here is that Canada is finished as we know it. Alberta, Saskatchewan, at the very least, do not want to be part of this country anymore if this country is going to elect somebody that is so grossly incompetent, so grossly, I would say, criminally negligent. I mean, the things that he has done, the unfair distribution of seats in Canada, the transfer payments, blocking the pipelines, his $10.5 million payment to Omar Khadr, the terrorist that's currently living in D.C., walking free, opening the borders to economic migrants.
Steve, I know this is going to be a really long list.
Yeah, I mean, his Mr. Dress-Up tour around the world, the nonsense, the climate change nonsense. If people are willing to put this, and I respect the office of Prime Minister, but I have zero respect for Justin Trudeau.
Steve, thank you.
He is grossly incompetent.
Steve, let's get some reaction as well from Hamilton. But that I think it's interesting. He's a transplant from Ontario, and he represents what a lot of Albertans are saying, is that how can we have a country that works if we have all of these barriers, if we're not acting as a country? And there's a lot of people willing to give up on it.
Let me ask this question, because when we think of separation, we think of Quebec, because that seems to be historically where the battle lies, and we all have opinions of that. But how great is the sentiment in Alberta to separate? How large is this issue? How serious is this issue?
Latest polls suggest as high as 25%. I think it's lower because Jason Kenney got elected and is promising to have a referendum on equalization. This is the issue, right? Is that it's sort of a twin issue. If Alberta's able to do well, if we're able to get our economy back on track, if we're making money, we have no problem sharing with the rest of the country. But to be blocked at being able to generate wealth and then be told by Quebec, keep the money coming anyway, and the reliance that they have on equalization, that's, I think, just a bridge too far for Albertans. They're feeling abused, and I think they're feeling unappreciated, and I think it'll blow over if it doesn't get addressed.
I think that once Ontarians start to consider Alberta separation as seriously as Quebec separation has dominated headlines over several decades, perhaps maybe that will change the tune. Interesting note from Rob says, "Hi Scott, unfortunately I think it's the media that thinks Ontarians don't think outside their borders, but I think this is incorrect. I talked to many people who think the oil and gas issues are very important, and that the liberals and the so-called environmentalists have failed us. The problem is, if you talk about this with certain people, you are labeled as anti-climate change. So much for free speech." I think that's an issue too, and it's something that has really, really embedded itself in Ontario. Is it has become a land of extremes, and that's what we saw at the Bernier issue with at Mohawk College with the extreme left that was protesting there. This seems to be what's getting the attention in Ontario. It's either the far right for doing this, or the far left for doing that, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of consensus or any sort of will to even come to the center and find a leader that can represent everybody and move the country in a direction that looks after both sides.
Well, you must be doing a good job, because you've got two very intelligent listeners who just weighed in and showed how much they care about our province, and I can tell you it's appreciated here. Let me go to Robert, who's on the line next. Robert, go ahead. What's on your mind?
Hey guys, listen, thanks so much, Scott and Danielle, for doing what you do, and thanks to the lads from Ontario that are saying those nice things. We just had a record snowfall here in Alberta, southern Alberta. I saw some guys on snowmobiles on YouTube, and they were buried under snow. Like, it was a couple of almost meters. I think it was like not meters, but 90 centimeters of snow. So I'm not sure the whole global warming thing is really heating up the way they thought it would. Well,
Robert, it certainly doesn't resonate as much here as it might in other parts of the country. If you want to weigh in, once again, 905-645-3221 is the number to call in Hamilton. You can keep on calling us here, 403-974-8255. Do you have another call or another text to read, Scott?
No, we're good for now. My issue that I wanted to touch on, though, is over and above, like I said, is it all energy? Is there anything else that people have to say about this Prime Minister over and above the oil and gas industry and just being ignored? Well, is that the central issue? Let me
get Norm to answer that question. Norm, what do you think? What's on your mind today?
Well, I would just like to, first of all, say thank you to the people of Ontario that have some common sense and realize what Alberta's going through. Another 4 years of Justin Trudeau, and I agree with what Scott said earlier on. That idiot, he shouldn't be reelected. He is nothing but a clown, and he's incompetent, as Scott said. And if we continue to elect him, and it's going to be won or lost in Ontario, and I'd like to ask the people of Ontario another thing. I'd like to ask them, they got rid of Kathleen Wynne, and they had Dalton McGuinty, who ran that province into the ground financially, and Ford comes in and tries to make some cuts. Does Ontario, do they know how to balance their bank book? I mean, how much longer do they think they can run that debt up. It's over $12 billion a year in interest payments alone.
Norm, thank you for that. That's, I guess, the other part is out here, the issue of fiscal responsibility. Can we afford everything that the politicians are promising? That's high on our list, because we've got a premier who wants to get us back into balanced budgets. So I think people are expecting the same at the federal level. Is that an issue at all?
It seems that Albertans seem to be a bit more fiscally responsible than Ontarians seem to be. As I mentioned, Kathleen Wynne and a Liberal government with McGuinty before that, there you go. The results are there. Doug Ford comes in. He tries to make cuts, tries to make adjustments, increases the class sizes, things like that, and people are just flipping out. So it appears in Ontario we want our cake and we want to be able to eat it too. Interesting question from Frank here, if I can squeeze this in before the break. Frank's asking, how do Albertans feel about the foreign investment to ultimate foreign ownership happening there? How do you feel about other people coming in and buying up the industry?
Well, you know what? Let's see if we can get one of our callers to answer that question. I can offer some insights, but let's take a quick pause. Do you want to throw a break, Scott?
Absolutely. This is a great experiment, and by the sounds of the callers, we're going to do it again. It is an east-west discussion. It is happening in Calgary and Hamilton. CHQR and CHML, the Danielle Steele Show, the Scott Thompson Show. We are coming right back.
Back. This show's about to get spicier because Scott just upgraded me to romance novelist Danielle Steele. I am Danielle Smith.
I'm so sorry.
You know what? I got that a lot when I was in politics too, so it's quite all right. If only I could be as famous as she is.
I'm blaming my mother because she reads those things all the time.
I know, and they are spicy. We better make sure we stay on politics, otherwise we might get edited.
If you want to, I've got a full bank of calls here. If you want to jump on this,
by
also
all means,
a quick email. Hey Scott, if Alberta and the prairies decide to separate, I hope Ontario joins them. For far too many years, Quebec has been the tail that has been wagging the dog. The last few years, BC has tried to put the second tail on that dog named Canada.
Holy cow, we're going to get something started. To answer your question, I've got somebody saying we are desperate for investment dollars. We are having the opposite problem. We used to be able to attract billions of dollars in investments, and now we can't. And so we see the issue of foreign investment a little bit differently than you might in Ontario. We'd love to see a return.
All right, we'll go to the phones here, 905-645-3221, star 9900 on your cell here in Hamilton. Bill is on the line. Bill, what's your question? What's your thought for Calgary, Alberta?
Well, I'm one of the proud owners of a T-shirt from the early 80s that had blue-eyed shakes in the front, being in Alberta, of course, and basically inviting those so-and-so posteriors in the east, yourselves included, to freeze in the dark.
Yeah.
I also am hearing a very similar refrain from our redneck neighbors in this area. Danielle's sort of on the fringe of those people that are inviting the people in British Columbia to do the same thing. We're going to turn off your taps, guys. And so that lack of ability in Alberta to actually get along with the rest of the country on this particular issue and pig-headedness has led me to believe that there's a real need to reopen the National Energy Program debate and basically put those people on the sidelines and get some rational academics involved and make sure that it happens with proper national interests involved.
All right, Bill, thanks for the call. Danielle, you want to weigh in on that?
I think Bill's right. I mean, I think that sometimes politicians say things not realizing how long it's going to last, how much hurt feelings there's going to be. I would tell you that whatever sentiment was expressed years ago, it's not the sentiment being expressed today. I think part of it is we have to find some way for economic survival. We want to find ways to work in partnership with our friends and neighbors. It's just our friends and neighbors don't seem to want to work in partnership with us these days.
All right, let's get back to the phone. John's on the line. John, what are your thoughts for Calgary, Alberta?
My thoughts are, I think voters have to really think. We're not just voting for a prime minister for internal affairs. We're voting for a prime minister that needs to represent Canada and all the global affairs that have to do with that. We need someone that's competent, that can go up against the U.S., China, Russia, Middle Eastern countries. Right now, we're a joke in their eyes. They're not taking Canada seriously whatsoever. We need someone that could represent Canada and deal with the leaders of these other countries. That's what voters have to think about. Who is best to do that?
That's a great comment. You know, that John could have been one of my callers. I do actually have a John who's lined up who wants to talk about some issues too. Let's go to him on the line as well. John, go ahead. What's your thought today?
Thank you, Danielle and Scott, for doing what you're doing. This is great to have this open dialogue. And sitting watching the TV media over the last few weeks, everything seems to be filtered in one direction. I may have the wrong perception of that. But with you two, obviously most of the people are listening in, and they're the converted. But the thing that people tend to really pay attention, especially those that don't have a good understanding, full understanding of the issues, they get most of it from the TV media. And I don't know how we break through so that there is, journalistic integrity that doesn't sway us to what is happening in the U.S.
John, thank you for that. I don't know if your callers share that frustration. I mean, I think that the print media, especially when you look at some of the work the Globe and Mail has done in breaking stories, I think they've done a tremendous job of being a watchdog on both political parties. But there is a concern some have about bias. Do you get calls like that too?
Absolutely. And, well, there was a study out just either this week or the week before in regard to science, and people are now questioning whether science is valid or not, whether they're viewing scientists as the elite. Well, and that's because, no matter what the political party is, each one is using the science to best fit their own agenda. And again, it's become team politics instead of what's great for the country.
I think you might be making reference to that article that said it's okay to eat beef, and I can tell you that resonated loud and clear in Alberta.
Well, I'm coming out there for an Alberta beef barbecue. I'm all in for that.
I love it. I've got Brad and Gary and Tim on the line. Do you've got some calls that you want to put in as well?
Keep going. I'll get you there in a second.
You got it. We got Brad on the line from Edmonton. Brad, what's on your mind today?
I'm trying to hit a home run here. I'm sorry.
Brad, let me come back to you. We've got Gary on the line. Gary, go ahead. What's on your mind today?
Hi, I'll be real quick. And I love that private enterprise is bringing Canadians together where the government is failing miserably.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Kudos to us. Yeah, there you go.
I just got back from a week and a half in Southern Ontario visiting family. North of Toronto, I was wearing my Make Trudeau drama teacher T-shirt. I wore that the whole time. Everybody up north of Toronto, right on, brother. But I was surprised the number of people down in Southern Ontario who don't seem to have any idea of how serious this is and how many people out west, me included a lot of time, want to separate. And I had some long conversations. And so on a Saturday night, I wore that T-shirt into the belly of the beast, which is downtown Toronto. And I was surprised that a young waitress in a restaurant gave me a high five, took my picture, said, I'm putting this on Facebook. And I had a group of young men walk by me somewhere down on wherever downtown Toronto is. And I thought, uh-oh. They came up and they said, we love your T-shirt. Thank you. And they all gave me high fives.
Holy cow, Gary. You might have met the only conservatives in downtown Toronto.
Yeah, you must have. And I'm thinking either that or they knew you were a tourist, because if they thought you were from Ontario, who knows what would have happened to you. But no, you're very, very accurate in the sense that if you go up into cottage country, into rural Ontario, it's very much a different picture than it is down in the urban areas. That's for sure.
That's so funny, because in rural Alberta, that's where you get your strongest conservative support. It seems like it's the opposite there. Maybe that's where you get more of your NDP support?
No, in the urban areas, in the built-up areas, you're going to see more Liberal, more NDP support. As you get to the rural areas, and this is specifically around because of the energy file and the energy costs that they're paying, because in rural areas of southern Ontario, not a lot of them receive natural gas, so therefore they're heating their homes on electricity. That's gone up through the sky in the last little while. So you're seeing most of the rural areas conservative. You get down into the lower into the cities and the built-up areas, then it becomes more liberal and more
That makes sense. I'll go back to Brad. Brad, go ahead. What's on your mind today?
Climate change is actually a creation to mess up everybody's brains to believe what isn't true. I mean, we all know what it was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. We didn't think the way we thought now. I mean, it's in our school, it's in our media and stuff. It's actually shooting things that are just make no sense. I mean, it was designed to destroy all industries: agriculture, the auto industry, coal, oil, gas, forestry, all the industries in Canada, that's what it's all about, was climate change, and that was a big idea. So now the whole country is going to be broke because of climate change, because it's absolutely illogical.
Brad, thank you for that. Brad is very concerned about the UN agenda and the fact that it has impact on every single one of our industries. Do you get that fear there too?
But I think the issue more in Ontario is people can agree that the climate is changing, that the climate is different. What they don't agree on is how to go about tackling it. And in Ontario, we don't believe, well, what we're seeing now is taxation. And taxation. I don't think the answer. The answer is research and development and using the natural resources that we have to help fund that. We have to transition. This is a long transition period. It's not something that's happening overnight.
Scott, we're going to end on a note of total agreement. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Danielle, thank you so much. Much appreciated. We here in Hamilton are very happy to participate anytime. And thanks so much to the great people of Calgary.
You got it. That was Scott Thompson, talk show host, 900 CHML in Hamilton. I'm Danielle Smith, 770 CHQR. We're going to take a break now for news. Stay with us on Chorus Radio.